Well, good morning and welcome to this legislative briefing. I'm Julie Alexander with Great Teams, Great Results. And I'm a member of the board of the Garland Chamber and so honored to be the moderator of today's meeting. We're really pleased to have Adriana Cruz with us today. She is the Executive Director of the Economic Development and Tourism for the Governor's Office. And she's going to give us an update on economic development resources. We are privileged today that today's event is sponsored by Atmos Energy. So thank you, Atmos, for doing this. And Eva Hummel is going to have a presentation here and tell us a little bit about Atmos and what they're up to these days. So Eva.
Yes, well, good morning, everybody. I am Eva Hummel with Atmos Energy, and it is absolutely our pleasure to sponsor the Garland Chamber Legislative Briefing. I look forward to hearing from Adriana Cruz as she gives the Chamber membership an update on economic development and tourism. Many of you may or may not know that since 2008, April has been designated National Safe Digging Month. Spring provides a time when many people begin outdoor projects, including landscaping, and we want you and your family to take these important safety steps. Always call 811 before any digging project. It is the safest way to avoid damaging underground utility lines, which could lead to an inconvenient outage. This is a free service. It is mandated by law, so always call 811 before you dig. And of course, I want to thank you for being a natural gas customer and want to share a short video that highlights natural gas as a clean energy fuel source for years to come. Again, thank you, Chamber, and I hope you enjoy this video.
Thank you, Eva. And once again, thank you so much. Is my mic on? Yes? Okay, thanks. Thanks, Eva, and thank you to Atmos Energy for supporting this event today. We always appreciate those industries and businesses that step up to the plate and wanting to support the efforts of the Chamber. As most of you know, the Garland Chamber's mission is to act as servant leaders and as a trusted unifying source for sustainable business growth. And we bring this event to you as an opportunity just to inform you as members and non-members of what's going on, not only here in our city, but also things around the state and the country that affect us. This forum is going to be recorded this morning, and so at the conclusion of the event, if you've registered, you will receive a link so that you can replay it at your convenience. And after Ms. Cruz has spoken, there will be a time for Q&A. And so please be sure that you're putting your questions into the chat box, and we will address those using that chat feature. It's my pleasure today to welcome Adriana Cruz. She was appointed in October of 2019 to lead the Governor's Economic Development and Tourism Office. The office markets Texas as one of the world's premier business and travel destinations. Amen to that. And as the executive director, she provides leadership to business and community development, economic development, finance, Texas Tourism, Texas Workforce Investment Council, the Texas Music Office, and the Texas Film Commission. That all sounds pretty fun to me. Ms. Cruz has more than 20 years of leadership experience in economic development, marketing, and international business. So we have a real expert on our hands this morning. In April of 2020, she was appointed by Governor Greg Abbott to the strike force to Open Texas, a team of nationally recognized private and public leaders to advise the governor on safely and strategically reopening the state. And in January of 2020, Governor Abbott appointed her to the Advisory Council on Cultural Affairs and named her vice chair of the council. And in 2021, he appointed her to the Texas Freight Advisory Committee. She also serves on the Texas Economic Development Council and the Texas Workforce Investment Council. In addition, from 2016 to 2019, she served on the Texas Economic Incentives Oversight Board to review the efficiency of Texas incentive programs. So welcome, Adriana. We're so glad that you could join us this morning. And we will all mute our microphones and give the floor to you.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Julie, for that kind introduction and for the invitation to join you this morning and provide you an update on what's happening at the governor's office and his legislative priorities. And normally, like we all do, we've all been doing Zoom meetings, and I've done a number of these Zoom presentations, and for some reason, I'm having some technical difficulties and have not been able to share my screen, but hopefully Karina's working on that in the background, and we'll get that resolved, and you'll be able to see what I'm talking about at the same time as I'm talking about it. So hopefully that will happen, but I'll go ahead and get started. And it is such an honor to serve as the Executive Director for Economic Development and Tourism for the great state of Texas. And I'm looking forward to sharing with you the things that have been going on this past year. And Julie, it's always exciting to hear about what people outside are talking about Texas. And there's a lot of talk about Texas right now. So first off, I want to tell you a little bit about our office. You know, our mission is to positively impact the economic prosperity of all Texans. And we do that by marketing and promoting Texas across the country and across the world as a premier business destination and tourism destination. We facilitate new jobs and investment, administer the state's incentive programs, provide export assistance for our Texas companies that are looking to do business abroad, provide economic research, and help to grow some of our targeted industry sectors. And we are fortunate to have Governor Abbott as our salesman in chief. He, reaches out and speaks to CEOs from across the country and across the world, personally welcoming them to the Lone Star State. And our office is divided into 6 divisions, which Julie mentioned, and we focus on different things: the incentive programs, helping our businesses to grow, small business development, the creative industries with the Texas Music Office and the Texas Film Commission, Travel Texas, which is the state entity responsible for tourism promotion, and then the Texas Workforce Investment Council, which is the group that coordinates the statewide workforce development strategy and works with our state partners. And there's the presentation. If we could forward to slide 3, that's about where I'm at right now. There we go. So there are the 6 divisions that I mentioned. And although selling Texas, Texas really sells itself. In economic development, it's really a team sport. And so we work closely with our local and regional economic development partners, like the Garland Chamber of Commerce, to enhance and grow our state's economy and attract new jobs and investment to the state. So we'll go to the next slide. And I'll talk a little bit about our business and community development division. This is the division that works with these prospects that are looking at Texas from outside of the state or in the world. So business recruitment, our local, working with our local companies, business retention and expansion. We have a group that works with that. Our small business and permit assistance group, international trade, the economic research and marketing and promotion. We'll go to the next slide. The Office of Small Business Assistance. This group has been incredibly busy this past year. And this is the principal resource for small businesses and entrepreneurs in Texas. And we've been doing a series of small business webinars throughout 2020 to help connect our small businesses with resources that they need in this difficult time. Next slide. And our Texas regional offices. So we have, the governor's office has regional offices throughout the state. There are 5 regions that you see here on this map. If we go to the next slide, the regional representative for North Texas is Janie Havel. So I'm sure that you all know Janie and have been familiar with her, but if there's ever anything that you need from our office, of course, you can reach out to any of us, but Janie is kind of our boots on the ground, if you will. Really, we say heels on the ground because all of our regional representatives are very professional and educated women. So we have an all-female regional team. So there are heels on the ground. Next slide. And then the economic development finance team. This is the group that oversees the financial incentives, the economic Texas Enterprise Fund, the Texas Enterprise Zone Program, and then our Events Trust Fund, which has been utilized in North Texas to great results. But under the leadership of Governor Abbott, we all work together to maintain Texas's status as the top state in the nation for business, economic vitality, and job creation. And we're committed to upholding Texas's status as a national leader for economic optimism and confidence as we continue into 2021. Next slide. And, it's always good to kind of talk about the latest Texas statistics and where we stand in relation to the country. Next slide. So Texas is unique in the country. If Texas were its own country, we'd be the 9th largest economy in the world, making the Lone Star State a leading investment destination in the US. In fact, we were ranked as the #1 location for foreign direct investment by Site Selection magazine. Our diverse and productive workforce, the 2nd largest labor force in the country, our central location and access to Mexico and Canada makes Texas a gateway for global trade. Next slide. We receive a lot of awards and recognitions, and we like to say in Texas, it ain't bragging if it's true. So it's always good to get these third-party recognitions. But Texas has been ranked as the best state for business for 16 years in a row by Chief Executive Magazine. We were ranked the state of the decade by Business Facilities Magazine. And we've been the top state for exports for 18 years in a row. Next slide. And there's a couple of more recognitions, but importantly, this March the 1st, Texas won a record-breaking 9th consecutive Governor's Cup from Site Selection Magazine. And that's a recognition that's given to the state for the most economic development projects in the country. So you can see that, you know, Texas has a lot of things going for it and a combination of factors that can't be beat. Next slide. We are the nation's job leader. We lead the nation in terms of job growth over the past 10 years. Next slide. And one of the main reasons that companies look to Texas is our people, our diverse and productive workforce, the second largest in the nation at 14 million strong. And Texas, as we know, is a popular location for talent to relocate. Next slide. And we can see that in our population growth. We add about 1,000 new Texans per day. And this slide shows some of the locations where those people are coming from. And of course, the census just released their numbers for 2020 yesterday that showed that Texas was the state that added the most in population over the 10-year period, adding almost 4 million people. I think the number's 3,999,990, something like that. So 4 million people, bringing us to 29 million in population. Next slide. And, you know, we saw a lot of announcements at the end of this past year. In 2020, we were home to 50 Fortune 500 headquarters, a good number of them located in North Texas and in the Dallas area. But at the end of 2020, we had 4 announcements in a row. CBRE, Oracle, Hewlett Packard Enterprises, and Charles Schwab made it official. They all moved their headquarters from California to Texas. And so I count 54. We'll see what Fortune says when they release their rankings. But we're thrilled to be the home to so many Fortune 500 companies. Next slide. And just to kind of show you the targeted industries that we focus on, petroleum refining and chemical products, advanced manufacturing, information technology, biotech and life sciences, corporate services, the creative industries, energy, and not just traditional oil and gas, but also renewable energy, and then aerospace, aviation, and defense. And of course, you know, our quality of life can't be beat. As you all know, the cost of living, the diversity of things to do, the diversity of our vistas, of course, continue to make Texas a location that people want to locate to. Next slide. Julie mentioned at the beginning the governor's strike force to open Texas, and it was an honor to serve on that strike force. But in March, both the state and the country shut down a great deal of operations in order to contain the spread of COVID-19. And then in April, as the governor announced the strike force to open Texas, we started reaching out to our industry associations, to our business associations and our economic development partners to find out how we could safely reopen the state, maintaining, protecting the lives of Texans while also protecting their livelihoods, and just, you know, going about opening the state in a strategic, methodical, and safe way. Next slide. And, you know, throughout the year, we saw openings at different capacities for different parts of the state, depending on the data and how the numbers were. And this March, so pretty much a year after the country and the state shut down, Governor Abbott issued an executive order increasing the capacity of all businesses and facilities to 100%, effective March the 10th. And that was because we had taken a year to learn how to protect ourselves, what were the things that needed to be done, the masking and the social distancing and the safety protocols that we had taken a year to learn. And of course, the numbers were in our favor as well. Next slide. So some of the results of that activity have been that the Texas economy saw the second fastest growth in the nation, with a 7.5% growth rate in the fourth quarter of 2020, which was faster than the nation as a whole. Our civilian labor force is back up to 14 million. In March, Texas gained 99,000 new jobs. Leisure and hospitality, which was a sector that was hit extremely hard, has added back that month 23,000 jobs, but overall about 300,000 jobs. And our exports continue to do very well. Next slide. And now the job recovery. So due to the pandemic, Texas lost about 1.4 million jobs with the shutdown in March between February and April 2020. And since that time, we have added back almost 1 million jobs, about 68% recovery rate. And a good amount of that have been in the leisure and hospitality sector, about 40%. Next slide. Currently, our unemployment is at 6.9%, which is higher than the nation, but we have to remember that Texas was hit with a 1-2 punch with oil and gas prices dropping in January of 2020, January, February, basically the first quarter of the year, and then COVID-19 happening right on the heels of that. So that really affected different parts of the state in different ways. But that's one of the reasons the unemployment rate continues to be higher than the nation. Next slide. There is good news, however, and these next slides are going to show the manufacturing outlook, service outlook, and retail outlook. So our factory activity increased in March for the 10th month in a row. So you can see that really steep decline in March, April of last year, and how it's come back, how it's rebounded back. Next slide. This is the same service sector outlook survey revenue index. And so you can see it's at the fastest pace since the middle of 2019. Next slide. And retail sales activity picked up sharply in March after remaining flat in February. Next slide. And now we'll talk a little bit about the tourism industry. I know that tourism is extremely important for many of our Texas communities, and I'm happy to say that there's continued optimism for recovery in 2021. The fall 2020 forecast from the U.S. Travel Association projects that a significant travel recovery is going to begin as early as the second quarter of 2021. In fact, 8 in 10 Americans have stated that they have at least tentative leisure travel plans in the summer months. But you can see here that hotel performance during spring break was extremely healthy and almost back to 2019 levels. Next slide. As I said, the jobs in the leisure and hospitality sector were the hardest hit by the pandemic, accounting for about 40% of job losses. But since April, 400,000 leisure and hospitality jobs have been added back to the Texas economy. And you can see here that our scheduled daily flights are continuing to increase as well. Next slide. Now we'll just go through a couple of things going on with the state legislature. Next slide. So one of the questions that was asked and you all wanted me to cover were Governor Abbott's legislative priorities. And he's made clear what his priorities this session are. One is to reform the state power grid through winterization, protecting Texans from spikes in energy bills, and reforming ERCOT, expanding broadband internet access across the state, and we're seeing movement on bills in that area, and providing civil liability protections for individuals, businesses, and healthcare providers that operated safely during the pandemic. Next slide. And just to say a word about the winter storm that impacted statewide, February 14th through the 18th. The worst winter weather, my slide says in 100 years, but actually it's even beyond that. I have talked to several people, and no one can remember a time when all 254 counties in Texas were under a winter storm watch, from Amarillo down to Brownsville. And so Governor Abbott made responding to the winter storm and resulting power outages an emergency item for this session, and has assured all Texans that this legislative session will not end until these items are fixed. Next slide. And I know we've seen a lot of the news and a lot of the headlines on companies that are relocating and expanding and that are interested in Texas. And I love that sign, "Gone to Texas." They're just putting that on business storefronts all over California and the Northeast. Next slide. But I do want to say that due to the governor's strategic and methodic approach to reopening the state back in April of last year, we started to see an increase in our prospect activity. And you can see in this slide, prior to the pandemic, we were averaging about 36, 37 inquiries a quarter on companies that were interested in potentially relocating or expanding to Texas. Now, this doesn't include the companies that you all and other regional economic development organizations are talking to or working with. These are just the ones that come to the governor's office. But you can see that after the pandemic, that number, has practically doubled. And so we have been extremely busy. Next slide. And just to give you a flavor of sort of the types of industries that are looking at the state, we've got, general manufacturing, petroleum refining, corporate services, food and agriculture. So a nice diversity of companies and industries that are looking at Texas. Next slide. So we track business expansion and relocation, not just the projects that we work, but existing companies that are expanding, that are adding square footage or adding jobs. And this is a slide that kind of shows the results of what we saw in 2020. So about 800 of this expansion and relocation activity across the state of Texas. The total investment is about $13 billion, and new jobs of 44,000 new jobs due to this relocation and expansion activity. And in Dallas County alone, there were 119 new projects, $2 billion in capital investment, and 19,200 new jobs. Next slide. And this just shows some of the announcements, some of the notable announcements that we had last year, including Tesla's decision to build their next gigafactory in Del Valle in Southeast Travis County. This is going to bring $1 billion of capital investment and 5,000 new jobs to Central Texas. You see there the headquarter announcements that I talked about earlier. Amazon made several announcements across Texas, announcing about 9,000 new jobs in 2020. And, as I said, firms in diverse industries are looking at the state in e-commerce and logistics, food manufacturing, supply chain, advanced and general manufacturing, life sciences, and corporate operations. So we're expecting a very busy 2021, probably a record year for us. But let me go to the next slide. I'm happy, of course, to answer any questions that you all might have, and want to thank you for inviting me to join you. 2020 has certainly been a challenging year for our country and our state, but it hasn't slowed down interest in Texas. If anything, it's stronger than it's ever been. And as I said, we're predicting a very busy 2021. Economic development is a team sport, and we couldn't see the success that the state has seen without the work of our chambers of commerce across the state, our regional economic development partners. It really takes all of us working together to ensure that we continue this success. There's no better state in the nation, and it's an honor to serve in this role. I want to ask you to please don't hesitate to reach out to our office if there's anything that we can do to be of assistance. And thank you for the invitation.
Adriana, thank you. I love her attitude of optimism, don't you? I mean, this is really very exciting, very, very exciting. We do have a question in the chat. This is Mark King with MicroPack. Adriana, how can the economic development within our local community improve our collaboration with the initiatives at the state level? How well are we doing?
That is a great question, and we can always do better. We really focus, and Governor Abbott has made clear that our focus is customer service. We are here to serve the citizens of Texas, the communities of Texas, our Texas businesses. And so we definitely want to be responsive and collaborative with you all. And if nothing else, this year has really showed us how we all need to band together and work together. I know that there have been a lot of opportunities. I mentioned the small business webinars that we did. We had to pivot. We usually do 15 in-person events, our small business events, and we partner with our chambers and our different organizations. And this year, we had to switch to everything virtual. And we really had to work with our local partners. And there were so many small businesses in need that we, act as a facilitator and make sure that they know that there are resources available to them in their community, their small business development center, their chamber of commerce, their local and regional economic development organization. And so we really started an effort to communicate more frequently and more regularly with our local economic development organizations. But we see that as a two-way street. So, we're communicating with you, but please communicate with us as well. If there's stuff that you are hearing, if there is stuff that you need, if there is stuff that isn't working, please let us know, and don't hesitate to call us. You can always contact Janie, and Janie will direct you to the right division in the office, but you can also just call the office directly. So yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah, it is. I know that here in Garland, economic development is extraordinarily important. It's really at the top of the list with the chamber and the city. Here's a question. Please talk about TWIC and the workforce development effort.
That's also a great question. And I feel like that's a division within our office that is kind of an unsung hero, sort of the best kept secret. Like, a lot of people don't know what it is that they do, but I do sit on their board, and it is a division within the governor's office. And their function is to, when people think of workforce development, they think of the Texas Workforce Commission exclusively, and that's all. But there's workforce development programs under higher education and the education agency and criminal justice. And so what TWIC does is sort of make sure that all of the workforce development strategies, there's one statewide strategy that everyone is sort of on the same page and working towards the same efforts. And so it is really a coordinating and facilitating function and reviewing of strategies. And then that strategy is presented to the governor for his approval, and he approves it. And if you think of your local workforce development board, right? There's 28 workforce development boards across the state. And communities work really closely with the workforce board at the local regional level. TWIC acts as the statewide workforce development board. So that's kind of the function that they play.
Okay. One of the things that I was really, and we're not surprised by listening to the news and reading the papers, the influx of companies coming into Texas. And I think those of us who do drive on the roads, we are seeing that definitely. And I know you and Austin have the same issues. So we've got this booming population and all these folks coming in. So workforce development is huge, isn't it? Because I know they're moving a lot of their people, but they're going to need a lot of people as well, right?
Absolutely. They hire, and really, if you think about, some of the announcements and some of the relocations that we've had, if they're relocating from somewhere, they're bringing a core group with them. They're not relocating all 500 jobs if it's a 500 job operation. They're bringing maybe the core team because they want to replicate the culture that they have or that they had wherever they were. But really the bulk of the hires are going to be local. And that workforce training is incredibly important. One of the tools that we talk about a lot, it's not one of our incentives, it's through the Texas Workforce Commission, but it's the Skills Development Fund. So that is an incentive that's used, and it's a really great partnership between a community college and that employer. The funds go to the community college to do customized training for the employer, and then the community college has that knowledge, very specific training that they've done for this company that they can then put into their curriculum. So their students are coming out with that training, and that's kind of a workforce pipeline built for that company. And so it's been an incredibly successful incentive. A lot of companies utilize it. And the great thing about it is that it's not just for the new companies coming in. Our existing companies can utilize it as well. Excuse me. So it doesn't have to be just a tool for somebody new coming in. It's something that our existing companies can use that say, I've got a new product, we've got a new line that we're putting in, and we really have some new equipment, and I've got a number of people that need to be trained. That could be potentially a skills development fund application. And we work incredibly close with the Texas Workforce Commission and with other state agency partners to help us to recruit companies in. So I think that's one of the, Texas does economic development like no other state in the country. And I think that's to our benefit because it is very collaborative. It is very much a partnership with our community, with our state agency partners, and with the company itself. The governor tells these companies that he meets with all the time, this is a partnership. This is a long-term partnership. And it's in our interest for you to be as successful as possible, because if that business is successful, then Texas is successful.
Well, here in Garland, we certainly have a tight partnership between the city, the chamber, our school district, and also our strong community college base. And so we understand about that, and that's good to know. Another question that's come up is, are there any state level initiatives to deal with supply chain shortages, such as steel, lumber, and microchips?
That is a great question. And that is something that really became visible due to the pandemic. And we saw that as, a lot of supply chain from Asia was shut down. And so we started hearing, that's why that business retention group is important, and our existing industry group is important, because we hear from industry what some of those issues are. And we started hearing, supply chain from Asia is shut down. Where can I get other supplies? And then even Mexico, we have such a strong trade relationship with Mexico. We had a list of essential services, essential manufacturing that remained operational. Mexico doesn't have a similar list. So Mexico shut down everything completely, all manufacturing. And a lot of our suppliers, those suppliers were not providing product And that was causing some of our Texas manufacturers to shut down, not because of COVID, but because they couldn't get their materials.
Couldn't get
And so
yeah.
we had to get involved. There was letters written, there was communication with some of those governors, with the president of Mexico, just to ask that they sort of mirror the essential manufacturing that was open in the United States, that they maintain that so that those supply chains could keep going. But that certainly became an issue. Are there any state initiatives? You know, being aware of it, I know that for microchips, the federal government has passed the CHIPS Act, which it's an acronym, which I cannot remember what it stands for, but it's basically a federal incentive to encourage semiconductor manufacturing in the United States. A lot of semiconductor chips are manufactured in Asia. And so now there's concern with that and wanting to bring some of that back to the United States. And so we are actively supporting that legislation. We are actively working with some significant projects in that area, and hopeful that, you know, we can have that chip manufacturing here in Texas, which, you know, the Dallas area is well known for, and home to the microchip itself. So we certainly see that as a strong area for us.
One other question from Mark King, and Mark, you may even want to jump in on this for a further explanation. Our business community here in Garland would like to validate the significant benefit of the Skills Development Fund. Mark, you want to comment on that, or is that clear enough for you, Adriana, to
No,
understand
absolutely.
what in the world he's talking about?
Well, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
I just want to, you know, compliment the Dallas College and the work that collaboration between our businesses in Garland and the community colleges. It's a bond that tied together with the chamber, and we even have the Dallas County Manufacturing Association under the chamber, along with you know, the city and everything to work together. And I think it's unique in Garland. And I just wanted to point out to you personally that from, you know, speaking on behalf of the businesses in Garland, this is an extremely beneficial at the personal level, at the individual level. This is a spectacular program, and the way that we operate it within Garland is spectacular. So I just wanted to give you that feedback from the business community.
Yes, and we are creating a lot of synergy between the college and the manufacturers. Another question, how does your office assess the impacts of proposed legislation on economic development initiatives on local municipalities?
That's a great question and a very timely one. So we will be assigned a fiscal note for any bill that might have an impact on our office or on economic development. And, you know, we have a great team of financial experts and researchers that, you know, go through the language and develop a fiscal note for it. And interestingly enough, and I'm trying to remember these numbers, but the 86th legislative session, there were 33 bills that we tracked that had an economic development component, economic development or workforce development component. This session, we're tracking 143 or something like that. Last year, we were asked to do about 15 fiscal notes. This year, we did 35 or 39. And that was, I don't even think that was the final count. But we do look at, you know, what that impact could be. Of course, the comptroller also weighs in. And then, you know, we look at, you know, a lot of the bills that we saw did not, at least the ones that were assigned to us, we didn't see a local impact because they were really, you know, things like the creation of the broadband office. You know, that's going to require staff, that's going to require this, they're going to have a report, they're going to have to, and so that establishment of an office in and of itself wouldn't have an impact locally, the work of the office in the future would have an impact locally, but we're asked to just look at the legislation itself. But that's a great question. That's kind of some inside baseball.
Yeah. Oh, we like to have inside info, don't we? We like that very much.
Yeah.
One of the things that I was thinking about when you were talking is this huge influx of population. And do we have the infrastructure to support that booming population?
That's a great question. And that is something that we have to be cognizant of. I mean, we have seen this population growth for years. So this is not anything new or surprising. And we have set aside the dollars for infrastructure, particularly for roadways. And I wish I had that slide in my deck, but there's $70 billion allocated for infrastructure. And we were ranked by CNBC, we were given an A+ in terms of our infrastructure investment and development. And there are more state highways, freight railways, and state roadways in Texas than any other state in the country. And so we definitely need to make sure that our infrastructure keeps up. I think that, you know, in addition to the road infrastructure, there's the broadband issue, which had became, I mean, that was an issue and an item of interest even before the pandemic. When the pandemic hit and we had stay-at-home orders, it highlighted it, you know, to an even greater degree, because through broadband we had, you know, telemedicine, remote education. I mean, so many things that you know, some of our communities didn't have access to. So that is another piece of infrastructure that, you know, is being looked at right now. And you know, that is one of the things that, you know, we definitely stay on top of and understand that that's very important to continue to maintain, so that Texas can continue to be as competitive as we are.
Yes, well, thank you so much. If there are there other questions? If so, just pop them in the chat very quickly. Otherwise, we're going to wrap this up. And I don't know about you, but I have found this presentation to be extraordinarily interesting. Bragging rights, we might say, and also just very optimistic. It's encouraging. And also, I don't know about the rest of you, but when she was talking about Texas as a travel destination, I really wanted a bite of that big sandwich, didn't you? I mean, I'm just curious. I'm gonna text you privately and find out where can I get that. It was absolutely wonderful. Well, just thank you, Adriana, so much for your wisdom and your expertise and your willingness to join us today. It has just really been fascinating. I'm fascinated by the work you do and all of the different things that you do. And thank you to Atmos Energy for the sponsorship today. Eva, thank you very, very much. Just a couple of highlights to get on your calendar is be sure that you're aware of an outdoor event, a fun outdoor event that's going to be our 12th annual Business Expo. It's going to be outside on the square, and that's going to be May 7th, Friday, May 7th, starting at 10 o'clock. So that's going to be great. So come down to the square and check out our businesses. And you'll find the registration information for that on the Chamber website. Well, if there are no other questions, thank you, everybody, so very much for being here today. It was great to see you all. I long to see you in person, give you a big hug. And until we see each other again, thank you all so very much and for your support of Garland. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.